This is the new Grassroots Communities What Really Matters panel discussions podcast. Today we're talking to Ali Dale and Des Brown. We'll go straight into it. So just quickly, do you both want to say your names and just explain what you do, maybe what you've done a little bit in the past with jobs related to youth work in Bristol? Whoever wants to go first?
So I'm Ali Dale. I guess I originally trained as a primary school teacher many moons ago, and then did stuff working with Playbus and work in homelessness and sports development, and then got into the Positive Futures programme, which was tackling antisocial behaviour and community nuisance, and then led Youth Moves for 13 years. And I'm no longer currently active in youth work.
That was a little wink. Wink.
No.
Can we get the gold to like, hey, Aiden?
Yeah, I want to find out now more. Let's just do the interview well.
Well, yeah. Like, the current job isn't youth work, is that's what I mean.
But it's community. It's interconnected in ways.
Yeah.
So Desmond Brown, I'm the founder and CEO of Growing Futures, that works with children, young people and their families impacted by school exclusion, serious youth violence and child criminal exploitation. So very operational with that, kind of calm down with that. I also am the independent chair of the Scrutiny of Police Powers panel, which works a lot with young people's and police, around them being stop searched and just the impact of criminal justice system on them. I wrote a report in 2019 around the criminal justice system in Avon and Somerset, which hopefully is trying to change the dials on the racialisation of criminal justice system, but even deeper than that, because we know that the effects aren't just on people of colour, it's also about class as well. So it's very much a line, the two, race and class can't really ever be separated when we come to the criminal justice system.
Yeah, much agreed. Cool. And just to say as well, with any of the questions, if anyone's got any discussion points or anything they want to say or question they want to ask anyone, jump straight in. It's free for all. So first of all, looking back over the last 10, 20 years, what's been the biggest shift in youth work in Bristol, and what do you think we've lost or gained along the way?
I guess, I don't know, from my point of view, the big shift was obviously when local authorities stopped having the funding, and within that then, as a result of that change, I think you saw a lot of people with huge levels of experience exit the sector. I think that if you were to do the same within teaching or aligned professions, like medical or whatever, and you lost that level of experience, that would have a cascading impact through generations. And I think that this last 10, 20 years, the biggest impact has been that change of, but I also think, I think particularly in the youth work sector, it's the most you learn from those people who have been there and have done it and have been around the block. So, all right, things might change. There might be new drugs. There might be new social media and things that weren't there when, your 60-year-old youth worker was going through their 20s, 30s. But actually, the ability to connect with young people, to understand what happens when you have challenging situations, when you have parents who are complaining or disruptive, whatever, all that thing. I think you take out that level of experience from any sector and you're going to struggle, but I think even more so in youth work. So I think if you're talking about the biggest impact, I think it's that. And I think that was just a national level cutting of that money. But I think then aligned with that was the shrinking of the sector as a result of the money that then led to the reduction in the training. So I think that you haven't got people going through the degree level, and I don't think you needed a degree to do youth work, but I think that if you don't have people with the expertise within the system and you don't have the training courses to support new people to get that base level, those two things have been seen the biggest impact. We could talk about money and we can talk about all that, but in reality, it's the people, I think.
No, I wonder as well with some of that. It's like, I think we probably spoke about it over the years, and it's one of those things, isn't it? I've always said it. It's like it's like going and doing I don't know, a carpentry course or something. You go and do that carpentry course and you go on site. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not going on site and the foreman's going to go, oh yeah, he knows all the tips and tricks, and he can get around there, or she can get around there really quickly.
Off you go.
Off you go. It just doesn't work like that, does it? So like the courses are there now, but people, if they don't learn from those experienced workers that have got all those skills, then it's hard to have all that kind of ability and experiences and knowledge that's been passed down for loads of years. It's definitely a challenge. I guess probably is like as well as that management kind of middle management, senior worker kind of level, which has been lost.
I would say so. I would say that was most clubs, most spaces had someone in it, and I think So I guess the other thing is that as youth work has not happened,
most of them would have had that degree as well because of the
way that the training was expected. Yeah,
it doesn't make you a better youth worker engaging young people, but it definitely deepens your learning.
Yeah, and it's those two things. I think
bring it together.
Yeah,
it's got to be helpful.
It kind of aligns everyone on the same place. You're working from the same sheet, rather than just experience and someone without experience. You're on the same sheet, and then you learn from each other, or you learn from experience and you have those debriefings. But at least you've got a point of entry where everyone knows where you're starting from.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, philosophy hasn't changed around youth work. I think power and permanence has. What's happened is we've lost place-based, open access, youth work, and what we've replaced it is with targeted crisis work, where back in the day we would have places where young people could go before crisis, where youth workers and people from the community knew the young people before anything happened. There was an idea of who they were. Young people, they went to youth clubs, and experienced youth workers and people that cared could spot the problems happening before they happen. Now what we've got is targeted crisis management, which has allowed more expertise around trauma-informed and racialized harm and all these things. But what we see is people falling through the cracks that maybe don't get that because there isn't spaces for them to go to. They're not seen in spaces. So, austerity happened. I think the commissioning logic changed a lot of things as well. Outputs rather than actually, the whole person was seen as the most important thing. And we see that with commissioning, around work. It is about how many kids can you get through and heal and make into productive members of society, rather than dealing with what all youth workers know is it's not about fixing the child. It really isn't. It's about being there to listen to them, to go through the problems, walk beside them. I mean, it's called a trusted adult now. That's what we call it. It's not someone in 12 weeks who's going to turn your life around, especially with some of the trauma that we see in our young people. It's not going to take 12 weeks. And I think that has been, as Ali said, people have left because, youth work was never about getting rich or a job that you did. It was about serving your community. And I think, what's happened is communities and government have stepped out of children's life now. They've just stepped away and just get on with it. And I think that has been the biggest change. I mean, as I said, the gains are, we have more trauma-informed practitioners. We start to understand some of the issues. But it is that targeted 12-week thing that will never work. And if you look at some of the commissioning, I'm going to say at Bristol City Council, how many managers do you need sit in an office to run what we need is youth workers on the street working with young people, not the other way around. So
consistency of that as well, isn't it? You're offering
absolutely.
the consistency. Because that's what
and
the
care,
challenge is.
just care. I mean, it's just, and as Andy said, the history of youth work and elders in the community that were there, they've all disappeared because they haven't been valued. And, one of the things I said to you before, I think when we talked, if you're going to value children, you've got to value the workers. If you don't value the workers, then you're not valuing the children. And it just seems to become a production line now where we just put our kids through one end, and if they don't go, they go into the reject basket, and the good ones go into the product basket. And that is what it is. And I think that is so, it disillusions me. And I think it has led to lots of people who really do care just saying, this isn't for me.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder, like back in the day then, was there the interventions from both your perspectives? Was there interventions, or was literally that youth provision starting at 8 years old, opportunity of juniors, whatever, in seniors, whatever it might be, and all the other different projects and things that come from it, employment, different bits and pieces? Was there a need for that intervention, or was the intervention different? Is there more of a need now? Because I guess working with young people when they're younger and having more opportunities for young people to engage at that point, hopefully would mean there's less need.
I think the interventions always happened, but if they happened from a place of, this is, like we're all going along to our youth club, this is now, I'm having a problem in my life, and the youth worker spots it and works with me. But if you separate those two things out, as there's spoken about, you find it very hard to connect that for a young person in their life. It's like, where's the anchor? And also, if you are trying to fix someone, which I agree you can't do in that way, where do you put them back to hold them when things have improved? And so I think that divorcing of, so I think if you talk about youth work, 10, 20 years, whatever, you've now got youth workers in lots of different settings, from schools to, to all these different places in youth offending. And maybe that practice of youth work sat within all of those spaces in the past. But what you haven't got now is somewhere to kind of
where
you
youth
can go
work
backwards
historically was always delivered.
Yeah.
Where people chose to come.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was almost seen as a norm. I mean, if I go back a long, long time ago when I was young, youth club or youth spaces were just the right that you had as a youth. You went because everyone else went. So you weren't. Sometimes people were pushed there by the parents, but you went because all your mates were going there. Or, I remember moving to a new town. That was how I got socialized into that, by going there. And it was, you still went through the same tribulations of that, but. It wasn't managing risk, and I think that's what youth work has become now. It's very much it's risk management rather than socialization of young people. Young people being together learn what the rules are, what they can get away with, and they grow together. I think at the moment what we see, and there's lots of issues around screens and this stuff, but is a lack of socialization around young people. It's the right to have a safe space for a young person has been taken away. And I think that has the effect. So chicken or egg, I think it's hard to say has the issues been caused, but I would say actually the youth work made sure that we didn't have as many issues as we had, because there was someone there from the community that everyone knew, that could have a word with your parents, knew the school teacher, the headmaster. There was a community loosely built around youth work. And we have lost that sadly because of austerity. And I don't know how we get it back.
Just very quickly, like with both of you, because I know you've sat at different tables over your careers and spoken to people in, whatever higher places. Do you think that this is understood by the powers that be, whether it be on a local level, or maybe a national level? Do you think that this is actually understood?
I mean, from my viewpoint, I think children become a problem that needs to be solved. And there are very good people who work, and you can't take that away. But the system is the thing that's failing, and I think it's been perpetuated. As I mentioned, we've taken actual physical youth workers away, and we've started to manage as a risk, as I keep saying, So you have got lots of senior leaders who maybe don't. I mean, one of the biggest thing I say, and again to Bristol City Council, but to anyone who's interested, come out and meet the children. Come down and see what the work actually is. Because, working with kids or young people who have, are seen as a risk. I sit in meetings with social workers, and what they talk about almost sound like monsters.
I don't know how you do it. I've had a little look into that world, and it was a challenge.
Yeah, well, it is. And then you actually, so I've started taking young people along to their meetings and afterwards people are, oh, he's such a lovely young man. He's nothing like the reports written about him.
Oh, and most people are.
Yeah.
Generally.
But that becomes, the Chinese whispers that keep going on and on and on is that someone writes a report, someone then writes a report off that report, something happens in that child's life that, they're caught with a knife and then it becomes, oh my God, this child is, and so you have people who are managing a child rather than being in their lives. And that to me is the issue. So step away from the office, get into the field, work with young people, and then they will see that you care about them.
And that's where change happens, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Actually in front of them and with them. And I think this is what young people are shouting for, stop managing
But they can
us.
smell it anyway, can't they?
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like if you've been bounced between people like managing and the hierarchy in schools and kicked out of things or not, or whatever the different challenges you face, you can absolutely tell the difference in how someone's trying to engage with you. And that's where youth work works. It's just, it's not enough of us. Ali, do you want to say anything else on that? Or
So I think your question was, do the powers that be know? I think I would say that's yes and no. I think that youth work is almost done in the shadows and has a very, I think I spoke about it previously, but it's got a really, it doesn't market itself well. It doesn't do advertising. It doesn't talk about the impact it makes. And it was therefore during austerity, during cuts, it was very easy to just take that thing off. I don't think they knew what they were losing because I don't think it was seen and I don't think it was shouted about. And therefore, we're now seeing 10, 20 years in, whatever it is, that the tail to the impact of those decisions, because actually, you go to school, you have a doctor, you maybe have a social worker or whatever if you need them, but youth work is the fourth pillar. Some schools can stand up on 3, but it's much more stable on 4. I think that the youth work, you've taken away that leg in many places or shaved it so small that there's a lot of wobbling, and people are now seeing that. What I think that gives is an opportunity for youth work to say, you've seen the impact, now invest in us. The risk is that, as I said, we've got a generation of people who haven't been, and then
that's young people and the powers that be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if they haven't seen it and haven't got it, then how do you raise that profile? I think it makes it challenging.
And I think also, I think youth work for a long time was seen as play work. Yeah. It wasn't seen as serious. Yeah. It was sitting playing FIFA on the screen was seen as playing, but actually some of the biggest conversations I've had around sexual health, around everything, youth violence, has been while interacting with a young person at a table tennis, snooker table, not sitting in a semicircle asking, because then they clam up. It has been when you, and that is the importance of it, because I think sometimes people come into their situations, set up a semicircle, and think that that's the way that you talk to young people. It is going to, go-karting with them and building those relationships. But as you're doing that, that is the science, is you're building relationships, and they're confiding. The amount of young people over a game of pool or a game of FIFA, I've discovered what's going on for them has been amazing. And so I think that professionalism has started to happen in youth work, but I still think it's seen as kind of like you're just playing or play worker. You're not really a serious member of a profession.
I wonder as well, as if you haven't experienced or felt the difference of youth work growing up, then maybe you're less likely to know about, the real impact of that as you get older. I mean, I don't know, I'm hazarding a guess that maybe a lot of people more at the highest points in politically maybe haven't had those experiences, so they're less likely to know about that. And that might not be fair for the current government, because I think probably it's fair to say maybe more might have come from those backgrounds. Maybe it's a class thing, as we spoke about before. Hopefully things are changing.
Well, if you take that back to the 14-year Tory government, there was a point where it was like, we're going to fund character building and resilience. We ended up with the NCS programme.
The amount of money spent on that could have funded youth services.
Rugby,
it's madness, isn't it?
Yeah, we ended up with like It was very much things. It was the army funding into the cadets. Of all of those things are fantastic things, but it was what I think.
Who are they trying to
that
engage?
Government, I think, their understanding of children and young people was through the lens of potentially a lot of them going to Eton and other schools and having that. So yes, you're right. You look back through your own life and your experiences, but if we haven't got those voices in and people understanding, then and that's where we've had this. I think YouthWorks had this real advertising marketing
not at the table.
challenge because it isn't able to express. It's more than just sitting around and doing what looks like quite simple. It's like those conversations with those young people to get them to open up to the point that Des is talking about are skilled and take training and years of experience. It isn't just something that happens.
No. And I think there is a cognitive dissonance around governments protecting, even talking about trauma is a common thing now, but the resistance to talking about trauma, young people's trauma, and I think that's why things like cadets and structured things were, as well as they're a good place for some young people, but it was almost like they just need a sharp shock. It's going back to that. What we need to do is
it's not flexible enough to build that holistic, loving relationship, with that caring relationship, which is on their terms. They choose to do what they want to do within the sessions. You support them to develop ideas and different things, and they grow because of it, don't they? I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen in some of those targeted things like you're saying, but it's just a different way of working.
Well, I think it was asking a question. What was asked was, "What's wrong with you?" Rather than what's happened to you, that trauma, and I think that's the evolution that we've got to now. But unfortunately, everything else has been stripped away. So we've kind of got to this thing of how we should deal with young people now, but we haven't got the resources to do it.
That comes on perfectly to the next question. So right now, what are young people in Bristol most saying they need, even if adults and services aren't hearing it? And what's getting in the way of meeting that need?
So the caveat is that I'm not, for 18 months. I'm
no,
going to put that
fair
out
enough.
there.
But
I'll answer it. I think that the obvious one is funding, isn't it? 70, 75%, whatever, national cuts in youth work, right? That's clear. Local authorities are no longer the funder. And I think that creates this. There is a challenge that, if Ben wants to set up grassroots communities, you could have been a Fishponds boy or a Southmead boy or a Bedminster, South Bristol boy, and your service would have been wherever you'd taken it because of your background. I think that the funding isn't spread evenly. It comes now much more. Charities are more business minded, and they go where the opportunities are and where the people are, and some great things can happen. But it doesn't mean it's where the people need it most, right?
Or what was needed, but
yeah, exactly. I guess what I would say, what do young people say? I think the things for me was that. When we were at Youth Moves, I think what I could see was there are young people who we were offering a SEND service, an LGBT group, a voice group, a juniors group, a seniors group, an inters group, all these different things, but we only had a finite room that we could get them in to do it. So actually the biggest challenge was you make the biggest difference where young people commit to themselves, like to do a bit more. And it was that you need to have them on 3 or 4. If you're seeing them 2-3 times a week, if you're seeing them once a week, and some of the circumstances that would happen out on the streets and out at home, the ability to make the difference was limited, I think. So we were looking for how can we extend that offer to young people to both fund it so that you can create more time with to build the relationships between youth worker and young person, but also give them that space where they can go when something is a bit of a challenge, because we know that is the case. And you sit in your room, you stay at home, you're on your phone or your whatever, watch a screen, Netflix, whatever you're doing, you aren't necessarily then going to, in your 2 hours, 3 hours that your youth club's open on a Thursday, Friday, Wednesday night for your age group, going to make a difference. And we have choices to make. Do we try and reach lots of people and have lots of different groups, or do we try and give this group more But then if you give one age group more, you probably don't create the pathway through that we want to see. So if we want an 8-year-old to potentially have a 10-year youth work experience, how do you do that? If you say, well, actually, we're open 3 nights a week for seniors, and juniors, you might get one, just come in the holidays, or whatever it would have been, where those choices were. So I think young people would, what we saw there was, how do we increase the dosage of youth work and the access to that, whilst also managing the finite resources of money that we had to enable people to do that.
Do you think, and I'm just going to say the obvious thing, but do you think that to do that, like the youth zone, for example, kind of what you're talking about, do you think that was the only way to do it? Because I just from the experience,
I think that the youth zone, obviously we were part of bringing that here. I think if you gave me a choice, I wouldn't have a youth zone quite so big, and I wouldn't have it. But I think that there's a happy medium somewhere in between what Youth Move
definitely
had and what the youth zone will bring. But the choice of youth zone at this size or nothing was kind of the binary choice that we had.
Who made that? Who gave that kind of ultimatum? Is a bit harsh. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to. Who gave that kind of decision? It's like it's going to be that big, or we don't do it. Was it?
I think Onside have a model. And at the time it was, this is what the model looks like. It's this big because it's a scale of economy thing, And I think that now I think before I left Youth Moves, I think Onside were having discussions about whether there was another model, partly so that they could get into places that couldn't afford the bigger one, but also thinking, well, actually, on a slightly smaller model, does it work? If you have a music recording studio and a sports hall and a, I don't know, whatever, but you don't have the climbing wall and you don't have the, everything. But, what do you need? You need kitchen and life skills, and you need, so an arts offer and a sports offer, but do you need everything?
All of it, yeah. Then
that's a kind of, but the model was the model at the point. And,
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I've always thought it, and I've said to you before, and it's just, again, it's only opinions, we've all got different opinions. I would definitely kind of argue the case that having place-based provisions that are open more often, that offer similarities with some of this, and utilising other organisations or other services that provide some of that, or businesses that provide some of that experience, would mean that you'd probably get more people coming to a smaller version of a central kind of place, say in South Bristol, Central and East, wherever. Yeah. But you'd get more people attending those other places locally, which would mean that you'd get more people engaged in the youth work that make a difference to their lives, and then they'd be more likely to attend. The big challenge for me is to see, for example, the kind of young people you're working with, Des, in those situations, are they going to go to somewhere like, and we know a lot of those young people will be around South. I would guess probably not. I hope they do, because I obviously want it to be a success. Do you know what I mean? But I think that lies the challenge. Des, sorry, mate.
Yeah, no, I think what you both said is completely right. I think for me, it seems to always be a centrally run thing. I think power, as I said, was the thing that hasn't changed. Is we need to give it to the communities themselves. And I think your idea of if there were smaller, and actually you had a climbing wall, we had a football pitch, someone else had this,
you could get in the interconnection there,
and then people would have to move. And as we said, postcodes is an issue. People travelling from South. It always shocks me, even though I know it, travelling to Cabot Circus from the South, people just don't go. People don't even leave St Paul's to go to Cabot Circus.
I done it on the weekend to get some of this from TK Maxx with my kids, and it's a right mission, mate.
Well, apart from the bus.
And I'm not 14. I'm on the bus.
And it is, young people talk about the fact that it's a hidden war that adults don't see around youth and street crime, where we kind of say, just get on a bus and get on with it. They're jumping through hurdles and going through fiery hoops, even travelling around, so they don't. And so, I think best intentions, I think we need to, but, people want to control. And I think that's the problem. We haven't said, actually, you as a community, you know best. Here, what should we do? I think there has just been this. We're going to do a massive project that looks good, and then make it work. You lot make it work, rather than, So I think the question is, what are young people saying? I think young people are saying, stop managing us, be with us. I think they're saying, a lot of our youth work is risk management now. It's not about, as I said before, it's not about dealing with that. And they know it. A lot of my young people refuse to do youth surveys because they're saying, well, what did you do the last time I told you this? And
it's the same with adults as well. How many times have people? It's
Consulted
just
to
like
death.
like we all understand it. How many times do you want to give them a bit of paper and then nothing happens?
But it's also patronising. They feel. I mean, as you said, they know what's going on. They're not just because they're young. It doesn't mean they're stupid. And in fact, a lot of them are much more streetwise than some of the adults who are running some of the programs because they've been forced to be. But they do feel patronised because. I've been in meetings where we've rolled out a young person, or they've been, I haven't rolled them out because I don't like it. And everyone claps when they've said something, and they've said something very profound. And then everyone, right, thank you very much, let's go on with business.
And what change happens?
And nothing. And we don't feed back to them. We don't tell them what the change is. So they've gone, well, actually, why bother?
They are used in that situation. They will feel used, and it's understandable.
Yeah. And we've got to stop doing it. And I am saying, youth voice is so important, but also the practitioner's voice. So we either choose, let's listen to the child, which we need to, but a lot of the practitioners, like us in this room now, we could probably name what the kids are going to say or the issues are, and probably do it in a way, because we've heard it for so long, that we can actually pinpoint the sections, rather than just hearing again from a young person who's experiencing for the first time, I just want a safe space. That's what you'll hear from every survey you've done. But yet we keep going back and asking them again and not delivering that safe space. So I think, again, value the practitioners if you want to value the children. So I think we do get very stuck in just not listening to them, but pretending we are.
Yeah, and I guess there's probably an element of both is needed. If you have to work the system to actually to get anything actually happening to support young people, then I can see how you might have to do what you need to do. But I guess that's the thing: is these things put in place based on the needs of young people, and is it going to maximise the most young people engaging in it and benefiting from it? Yeah,
I think there's agendas anyway before stuff is done. I think people.
Well, it's easier, isn't it? Easier to give a lot of money to one thing. It's got to be, hasn't it? Like I do get that. Like it must be an absolute. I mean, I don't know what it was like to run a youth service. I can imagine just going to meetings with youth organisations. It must be like herding cats. Do you know what I mean? I'm looking at Ali's face scrunching up. He's thinking, I'm out of that and I'm happy.
But Ali's proved what you can do, though, if it is run properly. I think you have proven that, because people like me would be scared to have done what you've done, because there is so much responsibility. There is so many bits that can go wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Working parts
and I'd be
to
the same.
Yeah. And I think that you have proved that there is positivity in that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I guess from my point of view, taking the youth workers that we had and making them, like I said, as full-time as we could give them.
That's the challenge as well.
Making that profession and then putting as many of them on pathways to train and develop, that was part of the things that we did. And I think that we did differently to others. Because I think as the money went, people kind of retreated back into their communities. And I believe in the place-based needing something nearby. But I think what was lost in that retreat into those spaces was the interconnection. So when I started out, like Ernie Curtis at Young Bristol running the football league, there was 20-something odd youth clubs all participating in that. You'd meet people, you'd do, different things, but they'd also play together in a representative team. So
which does exactly
you go,
bring people together.
I'm completely racist and I'm going to turn up and have a problem with Des every time because I'm from this community and he's from that community and we've got a big issue. And then you're like, actually, he's a really good whatever and we're going to play together. And there were ways of breaking it down. And I think as we separated into those smaller communities that probably didn't have the funding to then come and join up, we've lost something along the way, and young people have lost those opportunities to explore the city, to understand wider than their neighbourhood, to go through the hoops and the only way you can take people through those burning rings is to show them either that you can jump through it and it doesn't hurt.
Well, have the
or put them out
relationships.
for them, do you know what I mean?
Or give them an extinguisher.
Yeah, exactly. Teach them how to
You need to have the
it.
relationships to start with. I mean, it's an experiment, isn't it? And it's obviously, it must have worked in other places. Otherwise, that doesn't happen with, say, the youth zone. But for example, like, you've got to have those relationships to start with, haven't you, to do all the things you're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you think, and I don't know what discussions have happened in Central and East, do you think that there's something like that coming, a bigger space, or do you think that it would look differently in Central and East? Or I don't
think there is anything coming. I think, and again, I think there is fear of tackling some of the problems in East Central. I think, I'm not saying that South is any easier, but I think when you...
Well, there's less organisations, because I remember trying to chat to Asher Craig saying, hang on a minute, like, what's going to be left? Because who's going to be able to fund that stuff where young people might not go to the youth zone for, which is all playing out now.
Yeah.
And I remember, I said, well, what's happening over in Central East? And she went, well, they won't be doing that, will they? Right. I thought, well, how come it's all right over there? And I don't know if that's still the case.
Well, but I think there's also different. I mean, traditionally you've got intergenerational stuff in the South. East is, I mean, again, and I don't want to generalise because I think it's very easy to say one, we've all got the same problems all over the city, but some are more marked in different areas. And I think, unfortunately, race is a difficult thing for people to deal with in authority, and they don't sometimes want to face up to some of the issues. So I think that plays into East Central as well. Yeah. I think edification, and edification doesn't just happen to black people, it happens to lots of kids. But it's more pronounced, I think, with black kids. And I think some of it is actually the admitting that has gone on, has stopped some of these things being dealt with. Racism is something that does exist and affects children really, really quite deeply. It's not the only issue, but I think that's part of the problem. I think it seemed to be easier dealing with an homogenous group in the South. And I think that's patronising in itself.
We're seeing, and I don't think that's going to be the reality. But
I think that's patronising, and I think that's part of... I think it's facing up to the issues. I think this is the problem that...
Poverty and class, you said about it earlier, kind of interlinks, doesn't it? Racism is another thing, and I'm not going to pretend I know.
The isms are all over the place, Yeah. And I think it is facing up to whichever one we're dealing with. It's really saying, because, we blame our kids or our children for the issues they have. And until we realise actually it's our issues that we've given them to inherit, then we'll keep going round and we'll keep victim blaming the young people for the fact of the situation they're in, and we'll never get out of it. So, East Central, there's lots of good things happening. Mayor Matakoli is doing some great work there. There are organisations, Full Circle, you've got ACE, you've got some really good people who are, but the commissioning and the funding, is so outcome based that a lot of people just aren't bothering going through that. And even when they are, we did, in East Central, we did a bid for the diversion that Chance to Change got.
Okay.
And we still did, and there were some great organisations involved in that. And then we've been asking for a year on for an assessment of it, and can we get an assessment of what it's supposed to have done for our young people? No, I mean it's almost, let's not talk about it, So I think we have to face up to some of the issues that I think that adults need to look at ourselves before we start talking to our kids and telling them what to do. I think we need to start actually really having a good look at ourselves and how we have treated young people in this city for a long time.
And how we move forward with that as well.
And together with the young people. I think it's not just us to do it. We need to...
But if they're not there, if they haven't got the opportunity or the spaces and the places to be, and the staff with the ability to do that, then they're not going to have the choice, are they? So, moving on to the next question. If you could redesign youth work in Bristol for 2035 from scratch...
2035.
I mean, pick a number.
Yeah. All right.
In the future, what would it look like? And what's one bold move we should start this year to get there?
Early.
I think it goes back to what I've said before. I think the first thing is we need to shout about it. We need to find some businesses who are offering you pro bono marketing, comms, whatever, and get that voice, like talk about youth work in a completely different way. Not just in a, it's good, it's a nice to have, in a, this is the fourth plank of young people's lives. You know, that I just think you have to change the narrative right now, because I think I've spoken about youth work being the superpower that hides in the shadows. Do you know what I mean? It's there, it's doing amazing work, because I would challenge anyone who says, oh, it's just to go and stand on a street corner and get hold of the lads who are involved or the girls who are involved in, and who are at X place or Y place.
The thing is, we have got the impact, and we have got all the stories, and
it's not told in the right way, though, Ben.
No, I agree.
I think there's something about fundamentally, you know, there's been an erosion of the role of teacher, right? So if you were a teacher back in the past, you were put on a pedestal, right? And that's been eroded over time. But I think alongside that, kind of youth work's just sort of disappeared off the cliff.
Teachers have got less time for the social kind of emotional support as well. So it's where's that coming from?
But in terms of how they're held in society and how they're viewed, I think that there is an opportunity with everything that's happening and all the big challenges that we see around mental health, around screen time, about physical activity, around, you know, I mean, just in terms of aspiration, all that stuff that youth work's brilliant at, you know, community engagement, all of those things. But fundamentally, we're talking about building connections with young people to help them to navigate that period, which everyone knows is really tricky. It just needs, but I think it needs a rebrand, a refresh. I'd also, if I was going to do something right now, I would look at creating that level 3 and that degree level pathway. Some of those things now exist, but just putting lots of people on it, and maybe just trying to pull a couple people back who maybe slip, like some of those elders. You know,
do you know the challenge? I don't disagree. The challenge with that is that when it comes to those, and exactly what you try to get around, which is, you know, makes perfect sense, is that lots of those organisations, you know, I think probably we're similar to many in Central and East. The staff don't have the commitment of X amount of hours for them to then go and do, you know, like different courses and various things. They literally would not have the capacity, or to be paid, they lose out on whatever pay they might get from other multiple jobs they might have to get that learning.
So that's the one thing, and that changes. If there was an amount of money, you either.
But that needs to be across the board. That can't just be one thing. It needs to be.
But I think that you basically say, I don't know, Bristol College, central government, somewhere, you know, they changed the apprenticeship levy, whatever, to enable it to fund.
I've tried.
You know, those but there's ways of unlocking it. I would think that you could say everybody is going to have this, and it's paid for, and those hours are paid for, so they can do it, because, you know, back in the day, that's how people. That's how we had this. That's how we had that skilled workforce, which was second to none. Whereas right now, you look at it and you go, well, I've got so and so for 10 hours, 15, 18 hours a week, but that's all funded by different funding streams, and I don't have anything else to put them on training because I'll have to take them off of something else. Yeah. So you need that
dedicated.
There's a percentage, you know, whether that's a 3.5 hours a week, 10% of someone on a 30, 35, 37 hour week full time, you know, whatever that is, that's the equivalent.
Take something away from the managers who are managing.
Yeah. I mean, who do you think? So it's interesting what you say. So I mean, I get it. So business in the sense of helping with the marketing and making it known about the impact and the potential of this kind of work for young people and communities. Then there's this element of the skills that, you know, people need to do that work. Do you think that business are going to be the ones that are going to be best placed to fund that, or is this a government, just to finish this government situation? And for example, with that levy you were talking about there, because I have spoken to quite a lot of people about that, because I think they changed it to training as well now. So I was trying to get GAP
a little bit
to be involved. How many people went through GAP that ended up having that raw ability to really make a difference?
To engage.
But if you can't commit the amount of time that they need to pay the rent and, you know, live a life,
Yeah.
they're lost to the system.
Yeah.
So yeah, is it what's after the business then? Is it how do we unlock that money? Who are we talking to? How do we make that difference? Because it's a good idea, what you said.
It's interesting because when the government put the apprenticeship levy there, it was to make sure people were getting trained. But then what you've got is loads of businesses who aren't spending their apprenticeship levy in their own business because they don't bring through enough people. So they've got there's an underspend sitting there, but somehow that needs to be not just sit. I don't know what happens to it when they don't use it after a while. So it feels to me like unlocking some of those things that are already in the system, earmarked for training for young people. It's like, why can't we create
make it attractive
something
to them to do that? Rather than, as you say, you don't know what happens if there's a time limit or if it just sits there and they can time it out. Or I mean, no one likes to lose money.
No. There's a challenge. There's a challenge as well with that. If that money's there, so how many people that I work with, that young people that have done an apprenticeship and then maybe they've dropped out or it hasn't continued? Like, what happens? Like, I don't know. Like the accountability of like that money that then gets accessed by an apprenticeship provider, for example, and then that young person doesn't complete it, or you know, I mean, there's got to be like ways where we all know that different young people need different things, that diversity of provision. And some of this stuff that, you know, we're speaking about through youth provisions, you know, I crap on about GAP and a million other things. When you've got the evidence, you know it makes a difference. It's how you can consistently do that.
But I think businesses are becoming far more responsible. I think that social value acts, you know, you've got contracts that people are signing to, whether it's to build a new housing estate or a new road or whatever they're taking those. There's a percentage that they're there. Like just look Brewed for Good or Bristol beer, 2%, £500,000, right? If people did that, but what you then need is youth work needs to be there at the forefront saying, here's what that investment over X amount of time from X number of businesses would create, like this amount of wealth in the area.
What's your thought on this? I'll just say it quickly. Because I just think with that involves someone to be like that connection with businesses. And I think we know, like the reality is, if you're more financially stable and you can employ people that are business development people or whatever, then the reality is that money will get drawn down for that one organisation. There needs to be a central thing.
Yeah, you need something that's spreading it across.
Because otherwise you lose the place-based stuff, and we're going to find out very quickly the impact of this. We're in that now.
Well, you know,
it's a good idea. I agree. It's how it works for everyone.
Just on that, and then I want to go back to the teaching. Is, you know, look at Restore Trust, for instance. You know, I've worked quite closely with them around getting young people into the building chain. So doing the CSCS card and then moving them on. So it's like you said, they have a very good connection with the building trade, so that they have that. Where it falls down is some of the most vulnerable young people, they get the opportunity, but they don't know how to take it up. So that's when youth work comes in. And as you said, even after they've got the job, there needs to be some provision in there to help them, you know, even to know that if you can't come in today, just make that phone call is the advice I've given young people, rather than not turn up, you know, because a lot of these building companies, and especially in building, they actually kind of understand what some of these young people, because it is a trade where lots of people have come from similar backgrounds or had similar trouble. So with some of the work, they have been so understanding, they bent over backwards, but there hasn't been that blanket to catch people who fall through the cracks and to give them that onward momentum to try again and get harder. Either they give up. So I think there is that. But, you know, people like Bristol University, you know, massive employer in the city. They've got the big temple zone there. Why are our children involved in
Have you been spoken to about
that? I've been shouting about it because, you know, especially with criminal exploitation, you know, a lot of the kids that I work with, they're selling drugs to the students that go to that. So there is a responsibility of that.
There's going to be a lot of money right there, isn't there?
Yeah, so you know, and we've had those conversations. But, you know, you talked about whether it's central government. I think Bristol is a city that we could actually do it ourselves. We could actually set a template that the central government could use everywhere else. And we are known from doing these things, and we've done amazing things. I think businesses need to value the young people that they're working with rather than valuing some of the young people and not others. The amount of building work that's going on in the city, our children should be fully employed. There should be, there is enough money to then also get youth work to support those young people into work. Going back to teachers, I speak to teachers who are desperate to help some of their students, but either it's an academy they work with won't open up after hours. I mean, I remember as a child, barn dances, events at school. School was the centre of the community. You're asking in 2035, schools need to be opened up to their community, to their young people, address communities like youth workers like us to go into the schools, to be part of that community. Our children spend most of their days in school if they go. But even if they don't go, they should have access to a school at the weekends, in the evenings.
Well, there aren't provisions elsewhere anymore, as we've already said. So it's.
I mean, I've got. I can't remember the name of the organisation in East Central. They were desperate. They had a football team, desperate for a place to play. The schools were charging them £100 an hour to play on their pitches in the schools.
What is this at City Academy?
And there's lots of schools, around there that they had to pay for floodlights. And I understand that costs money, but there is a social value thing there for the children who aren't going to school or the kids who are going.
Or even if they are, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, but that is how you socialise them. So my wish is that schools open up to the community becomes more part of the school, that schools aren't run for profit, they're run for children to succeed, whatever that cost is. And I think that needs to change. I think we need to be invited in. There's a lot of lip service around that. But actually, if we look at the exclusion rates for children in schools, and even in primary schools now, I think we're the 7th highest in the country in Bristol. So there is an issue there. And how come we're not talking about that? It seems to be covered up, that we never really know what's going on. So I think we need to, and I keep saying this, my mantra is we need to be open about what the problems are if we're going to solve them. I think there are a lot of pockets of people kind of operating in shadows and not really wanting to address it because either, we always talk about the great stuff we're doing. We never talk about the things that we're failing at. And that's as an organisation. I think we're always told when we sit in meetings, we talk about how great we're doing with young people. We don't talk about where we're failing our young people. And that it shouldn't be a badge of shame. It should be, of course, you're not going to succeed because the world we're living in and working
you can. In, the situations young people are in, you're working
and
with.
We are advocates for them. So I think we need to talk about things that aren't going right as a city. And stop talking ourselves up all the time and it is that funding logic as well.
Competitive nature of the voluntary sector.
Yeah. Because we want that little bit of funding that's scraping down from, and then when there's a massive contract, none of us get it in the city. It's someone from outside that comes in and then employs subcontracts us to do the work because they don't know what to do. So, there is so much, possibilities in this city. Going from businesses to invest in our young people, to value them, to commissioning of big projects that should be run by us, you and me, Ben and Al. We should be sitting on pots of millions of pounds for our young people across the city, or at least sitting on a board where we're saying what it should be done with it.
Just like, I guess the things just in every other way that you think about, humanity, you've got this wide ecosystem of lots of different things that provides that diverse needs for individual people, individual young people. And if somehow aligning all those things you both said, which all make sense, and someone or a certain kind of collective is actually really kind of make sure that sings, that feels like it'll have a bigger impact. But I know that's a bigger piece of work. But otherwise, I think we're always going to be, just trying to be putting a plaster over the problem if we're just going to try and hope that it all comes in certain places. And that's the challenge. Any more thoughts? Any thoughts on what to do for the future? I mean, you said a lot.
I think one of the things you just highlighted there was just that piecemeal nature of it at the moment. It doesn't have a joined up.
No.
So I'm really pleased since I've not been, there's a national youth strategy.
Yeah.
There wasn't one. If you don't have a vision or a plan or an idea of how it's going to work, then yes, Bristol can sort itself out, but then how does that fit into where the money's coming or how the opportunity's coming? How do we get that lobbying, of central government. There isn't money, but you can write things in. Like, I think Hennington, the German comedian, someone said, like, what do good charities look like? And he said, efficient tax systems, right? Now, if you get it right, you can, under all the contracts that people are delivering in this city, and Bristol is a wealthy city, you can redistribute that wealth and you can fund some of those things to enable sports clubs to not have to pay £100 an hour, but it's more, maybe it's 50 or 30 or whatever the number is, but it's subsidised.
It's got to be policy, surely, because business. Unfortunately, I don't believe. Look, there's lots of good, well-meaning people in business and in society in general, but everyone is not just suddenly going to go, "I'm going to give that to that," because they won't necessarily understand it or haven't felt it.
Which is why I think having that national youth strategy, a vision for what it looks like. I haven't read it enough to know how clearly it describes youth work and how much it describes youth engagement and youth employment and youth offend, like all of those other mentoring, whatever. I wouldn't have that knowledge right now. But you have to have something that everyone can go, all right, great, that's how we're being seen. How do we then use those levers of power to unlock things and create noise and make change?
And I think also we've got to look at the language we use. Consultation isn't leadership. Inclusion isn't power. And I think we're still kind of round the edges of stuff and thinking that is enough. Well, we've done the inclusion, we've been out to consultate, and then we're just going to do this. I think our young people need to feel empowered in their own lives, in their own destiny, around, and that is through youth work and youth workers, that actually there is hope. Because the biggest thing in our city is, and with young people I meet, that actually breaks me is the lack of hope. The lack of hope they have for themselves moving forward, and the decisions they've made. I've got young people who've made bad decisions and they think their life is over because they've made those bad decisions. And adults aren't helping them get through.
I've got the role models to see that there is another way, have they?
So I think we've got to stop using this language of empowerment that isn't really empowerment. I think we really just got to move to the empowering young people to make decisions. I think, and empowering youth work to be more higher profiled in our city, because, the biggest issue, if you look at any media, from watching TV to the papers, is youth violence. Adults are scared of children. I mean, that is the biggest story at the moment in this city. So what are we doing about it? We're not doing anything. We're just kind of sitting with that fear. And the young people, as you said, aren't stupid. They know that. They know. And for them, the power is the fear. And that means they're doing something,
if you need to survive, you'd use whatever tools you can to survive, wouldn't you?
And they don't feel valued. They don't feel valued by their school, but also they don't feel that they don't think their parents can protect them. They don't think the schools can protect them, and they don't think the police can protect them. So what are they going to do with that rationale that we've given them as a society?
Protect yourself. And now we know where we are.
And it's not just those. We've got to be careful that we don't just focus on the ones that we hear on the news.
Yeah.
There are young people who we would say are good young people who are struggling in the city, who we need to be as concerned about as the ones who. And I think that sometimes is we're kind of rushing to the knife crime. This is the biggest thing, and so
there's a ripple effect, isn't there, of all of this on all young people and the communities. Interesting stuff. So I'm going to get the tech out now. That means my phone.
Put the screen away.
So we're going to get a question from Brandon. So we originally started the podcast chatting to young people, giving young people a platform to talk about the things that matter to them. And so we're asking different young people that we spoke to before. So this question comes from Brandon. And let's see if this works.
Hello, I'm Brandon from Norwest, and these are my questions. I believe the cost of living crisis has affected youth work. Do you agree? I also met Lisa Nandi, the Secretary State for Culture, Media and Sport. If you was in her position, what would you do differently?
And that 100% come from him. And when it did, I was like, go on, son.
Has the cost of living crisis impacted young people? I mean, quite clearly.
Yeah.
Families have less money. There's less opportunity in a place. If you're already in a household where it's struggling, then it's made things 10 times worse, hasn't it? Access to opportunities, access to places. Youth work should be free, I believe, at the point of access.
100%.
Right? But obviously, if you don't have access to youth work, you're probably accessing a sports club or something else, and you probably do have to pay because there's an affiliation fee or there's an insurance, like whatever you need to cover. So yes, cost of living has clearly had a big impact, and I think it's still doing so. We're not out of the cost of living crisis. Things are still, and it's the things that have gone up have bitten those who are the shortest, in terms of their funding. So food,
employment opportunities, for example, to get out of it.
Yeah, but food and heating and rent and those things. So there is stuff that can be done to reduce that down, and I think that comes again from policy and others. To pick on, to Lisa Nandy as culture and secretary, I guess it's that.
He met her at the Empire Fighting Chance thing. He's showboating. Fair play to him.
Yeah, I like it.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah.
I hope he asked her some questions.
Yeah,
He did.
You should get him after us. But I think that every government has cycles. Unfortunately, most of what we look at is. So I look back at Sure Start. They've got 20, 25 years on from Sure Start, the evidence of how it lifted people out of poverty and the change that it made. But there are very few policymakers who make decisions thinking on that long term. They usually make decisions based on, I'm probably not here next week. Keir Starmer, even today, it was what have we done with Andy Burnham? And that's trying to look after yourself. What's going on? And, and then we have all these other things that are happening. But it's very short term, politics looks quite short term. And I think if I was to give Lisa Nandy one thing, is make the decisions now that are going to make a difference for 25 years,
Absolutely.
like Sure Start did, not that's going to make sure you get back in the next...
And leave a real legacy. If that's what you're in it for, to serve the people. And I get the feeling she probably would be someone like that, I'd hope. But I don't know if that is valued above her. Maybe, I don't know.
I think that, the problem with our politics, starting with that, is it's populist. And that's a problem. There isn't, we've seen through the U-turns on winter fuel allowance and everything else. It's if the Daily Mail and the Mirror say people don't like it, they're going to change it. So, and as I said, what's happening with young people have been demonized by that press. People are saying lock them up. They should be all going to prison. They should all be that. So that is, and for a Labour government, I'd hope that would be a bit less authoritarian and start looking, at maybe reducing prison places and more diversions. I don't think that's happening. But the cost of living, of course, it has. Again, it's if we look at arts, you were talking about paying for, playing a musical instrument now. If you haven't got, you can't learn to play a musical instrument unless you've got money. I mean, even in school where it used to be free to learn how to play.
I had an amazing thing to shut on that straight away. That's how Motown happened. If it wasn't for the American government, every kid had to learn, where did that whole, and then what come from Motown? It's soul and
I learned the trombone as a kid,
Hip hop, it all comes from there. Yeah. Sorry,
but it's really true. And I think, the arts, it's been straight. But what has been highlighted, through this is that money is the most important thing. And I think that's what's coming through for young people. It's, the cost of living has ensured that we don't look at anything else apart from what's in the bank account, how much you've got, because you've got to survive. But it's become the thing. What materialism has become things. So things like arts have stripped away from our education system. Most of our young people that we're worried about probably won't do art, probably won't have, be able to do music. I mean, unless they're in the studio rapping, because that's a targeted thing that we say, but won't be necessarily making films. I mean, Power Town.
You need the kit and the time, don't you, and the energy to keep.
But you've got to value that as well. I mean, if we're going to build a society, art is one of the things that makes society worth living in.
Yeah. Creativity, full stop.
Yeah. So I think what's happening to our young people is that they've been pushed down this road of becoming productive, not in the way of productive for the community, but for the taxman. Mm-hmm. That's what we are. We're on a balance sheet, And you're valued if you're paying taxes and you're doing this. You're not valued if you're, we talk about the social security, people on the dole as if they're scum of the earth,
There's a lot of people that learnt their skills that then changed massive things in the world.
Absolutely.
That had the time to do it.
There's also people who need help, who are sick, who need that support, but it's been demonised. So it's not just the cost of living. I think there's an ideology that has led us away from community, and I think what we're all about here is community. Our society was supposed to lift up those that couldn't lift themselves up, that we were all there to lift them up, and we're just not doing that anymore. It's very much, it's on the pound. That is the most important thing. So cultural secretary, make art. I think we should be giving young people opportunities for free, and that should, whether that's a big tax bill for the country, I think that will change the headlines from young kids running riot in cities with knives. We will suddenly change, not overnight, but we will start seeing a society that we actually like, rather than this that we're all scared of.
I mean, just on that, the Child Poverty Action Plan that's come out, they've shown that the young people who start with the biggest challenges, the greatest level of social mobility is nearly all in London. And they think that a lot of that's down to access to free transport, because then they can access culture, jobs, training, school, like whatever, college, wherever it is. If you're in this city and you've got to get from one side to the other.
I wonder how much provision that's free as well per amount of young people within London in comparison to other cities. I can only imagine. There's just more opportunities.
Well, I mean, London is going to have that.
That's understandable.
You can make transport free for young people under a particular age to create that. Yes, there's things that need to happen, but just giving people, helping take away some of those barriers and remove some of that structural stuff, I think is.
Didn't Helen Goodwin do that
in the holidays
over the summer?
In the holidays, and loads of young people were definitely using it. We were talking
about, it works, and we need to expand that more generally.
It's about making that a consistent commitment rather than let's pilot it, and I think that will be learned. But obviously, that notion of social mobility and people moving and having opportunity, like I said, we need to create that for all, don't we, rather than for some in a more, how do you balance that out?
I mean, I know that I was part of for a little bit the pupil pledge. I don't know if that they're working on that at the moment, where they are basically, the city council are talking about there needs to be a charter that guarantees young people certain things like a AAA, access to sports. And so I think that is something that has been worked on. Whether that actually comes to fruition in a meaningful way, or if it's just another scheme that's kind of going to die off. But I think as you said, I think we need to advertise some of these things a bit more, even if they're in the pipeline, because people need to get on and demand it as well. I think, living in a democracy, I think sometimes, especially around youth work, we're not consulted as anyone outside of youth work, like parents and other people aren't consulted, because I think sometimes if parents knew what was in the pipeline or what was on offer, they would be demanding it for their young people. And again,
or even as a possibility.
Yeah. But I think, again, the other thing that I would say is that parents, the amount of parents that say, what are you lot doing for my kid? I think that we need to reintegrate parents into the lives of their children and the responsibility that they have, and the ability to tell organisation institutions what they want for their young people. I think that a lot of it has been taken away. If you look at schools, a lot of decisions are made about children without parents, whether that's exclusions or all that. So I think that there needs to be a re-establishment of the parents' role within youth and young people's lives. I think a lot of that has been taken away, and then we blame the parents also for the fact that they don't feel that they've got any control or any insight into their child's life. So there's a lot to do. And,
should be done by Wednesday.
Off you go.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's great to chat to you both. I knew both of you would have like loads of knowledge, opinions, understanding, experience from stuff you've done before. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, you never know. Like, people might hear this and might think, okay, well, it's putting some of this stuff a little bit more in the limelight. And it might grease the wheels of change a bit more. But there's lots of good people out there, like you guys and others across the city, doing their best in challenging times. And it's just trying to kind of tweak that system so it really works for young people. Thanks for sharing everything.
If I could say that, but I think having this opportunity to sit down and have this conversation where actually you feel a bit like, actually, I am the right boss, because Andy's saying exactly the same thing I am. I think sometimes you can work in silos and you don't know if everyone's thinking the same. And I think that's also what this podcast and we need more opportunities as youth workers just to have a chat with each other and come up with our own point, because it's so demanding that sometimes we don't, your blinkers on and you're just doing what you're doing and you're not looking to the left or the right. And actually, we're probably all doing the same thing.
I think that just to pick up on that, the biggest changes come from like trade union movement, people coming together and shared voice, alliancing, whatever you want to call it. But it's that, how do you all have the same challenges and then shout about them in a louder way that gets heard?
I like that youth work union. We set up our union.
They used to. I mean, one of the things as well is like they used to do. NYA done like a supper club thing or a tea break thing, because I think part of the thing I get is you go to meetings and you both know, like certain people will have a bit more power in that room. Other people, organisations won't go because they don't have capacity. And the reality is you don't have these honest discussions. And that is the reason for this podcast, talking to professionals, because every one of you I know has done great stuff, hence you've been invited. Who am I to invite? Do you know what I mean? I get that. I'm inviting people based on my own experience and knowledge of what people have done. But absolutely, it's providing that platform where people can really openly, honestly talk about these things, because I don't think you get that opportunity in a lot of the meetings for different reasons, just based on the fact that the amount of people are there and there has to be agendas to get things done.
But I think sometimes the meeting is also kind of under the guise of, if I do speak out of turn, will I get funded?
Yeah.
And I think that is so people always are kind of very positive. This thing about not saying...
Not always.
But not saying what's wrong.
Some of us might have.
No, that's why I'm not invited to things anymore.
Oh, yeah, I feel your pain. On that note, thanks for coming.
Nice one.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Cheers.